Okay, so moving on from the last video again, we're now going to bring in our prop models and get them driven by the bones from the motion capture and see how we can get those looking and set those up dynamically. So let's skip to the first fight section. We could do this in any of them. We just need a take with the two props sat in there. So let's move to fight section 1004, and as you can see, there's only Andy in there. So if I unhide Lyndall, mocap, unhide the assassin character, and let's unhide the two mocap props. So for the props, we can see we've got this one here, which is sword 7M, which is in front of Lyndall. So we have here the markers on our prop. Now what we're going to do is bring each model in and line them up with that. And then we have over here for Andy, he was using the 6 marker prop as well. So in a similar process like we did with our character FBX models, we're going to go to the asset browser and then we can drag and drop them into the scene. So which should we start with? Again, back to the last video, I don't mind what props you use. You can use the swords or the sabers. So let's start with the swords. I'm going to bring all of them in this one and show you how it's different for each one, because these are just models without bones. The sabers are actually have a bone in there and a skinned. So let's do Lyndall's first. So let's bring sword W7 in, FBX merge, no animation, and here we have the model has come in over here. My bad, I don't think I zeroed out the transforms on that, the positional transforms anyway when it came in, because it hasn't come in the origin. But again, it's dead easy to line it up, and we can use the X drag or the Alt drag function in Motionbuilder. It's Alt drag if you have Motionbuilder's native control mapping, but we've set it up for Maya, so all of our kind of functional dragging is done with the X key. So one of the things we can do is drag, click on the sword, hold X down and drag it over to the bone and say align, translation, all. It's linked up the pivot points, but as we can see, it's not rotated around properly. That's because the rotational axes are different on this model. So let's just rotate that round. And again, now we can, let's just fine tune that. So what I'm trying to do is line this up the same as the markers on the prop. And again, we can jump back to our reference videos. If I go back to here, CT6 mocap, fight sequence, reference photos, and look down here, we've got 7M marker back. So let's have a look at that one. Let's have a look at that. So if I full screen that, we can see here, there's a marker on the hilt of the sword. The crossguard actually had these kind of ball-like structures on the end, so we just covered those in mocap tape and they acted as markers. And then we've taped quite heavily these markers on. The whole sword was covered in masking tape because it was a shiny white kind of nylon. And you can see now these marker lineups. So what I'm going to look for is the side view. So you can see there's one on the hilt, and then we've got these ones were put nearest the crossguard to give the most rigid, so they didn't wobble about. And then these markers on the end give us the sort of bend of the sword if we so wish. So this is what I'm looking for to line our model up effectively. That's the reference I'm going to use. So thinking about those, now you can see, look, those don't quite line up. So if I use the move tool in local, I can kind of line those up. I can rotate. I can maybe move that over a tiny tad to average that so it's as close as possible. Now down the sword, I can see lining up down there. It's okay. Tiny tweak back the other way. And then along the length of the sword, it should fit evenly between the markers, like so. And again, maybe just move it forward a tad. That'll do. Again, we can adjust this later on, but for now, we have that sort of lined up. So let's zoom in. Let's do the next stage of actually constraining this to the bone from the mocap. So this bone here is the mocap, and then our FBX model is here. So now we're going to constrain this model to this bone so it moves exactly the same. So to do that, we come back to our asset browser, and we look in the constraints section, and we're looking for parent-child. So if I bring that in, drag that, drop it onto the sword model, and select constrain object. And now we want to set this, we have a source object down here, we want to set the bone. So if we select that, that's sword 7M root, select it and then hold X, drag it down and drop it into the source slot. And then the next important one is to click the snap button. You see the active thing comes up. The snap looks at the different transform offsets and aligns them based on those offsets. You can lock this now, but if I want to go back and adjust it, so at the moment I can adjust this, just scrub forward. And now we can see our actor come in and our sword is being picked up and being driven. Now if at any time I want to move this sword, I could adjust it forwards like that. And now it's picked up and that adjustment has been made. The model's not 100% millimeter accurate, so again we're looking for that kind of best fit. Now if I want to avoid moving that by accident, I can lock it, and then if I want to come back and adjust it at any time, I can unlock it, move it, lock it again. I'm going to leave them locked just for now, just in case I don't move them by accident. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the other sword. Let's reset back to 0. And now we'll go back to our asset browser, FBX Models, and bring in the sword 6 prop. FBX merge, no animation. And now I'm going to select that, hold X down, drag it over, align, translation, all. And now we can go that same process. Let's using rotate in the local axis again to kind of get a lineup that works. Move that forward. Now we can check down the length of the sword. I'm using the right mouse button for fine adjustments. Now we can rotate that down. That looks good enough for me for now. So again, zoom in, double click. Now we can get a constraint, parent-child, drag and drop onto the sword, constrain object, and then X drag the bone into the source slot, snap, and lock. So now, if we zoom out and play our scene, our actors now have their swords moving. Now again, that's not bad actually. I'm going to go to models only, or normal actually, so I can see the markers. Now as far as that's concerned, seeing as we've done none of the parameterizing or tweaking like that, this is our first pass of lineup, and that's looking pretty good. They're sort of in the hands, and I saw our actors actually did put their fingers over the cross guard a couple of times. But again, if I so wanted to here, but it's a bit early days too, but I'm just showing you how we could do this later on. If I wanted to come in and move this sword, let's do a little bit of renaming. Yeah. So parent-child here is for the 7 marker sword. So let's do that. Let's rename that. And I'll put underscore 7M. Rename that one. Underscore 6M. I'm going to save my file now, but I'm going to save this as a new version, number 5. Constraints. There we go. FBX prop constraints. And save that. Save. Okay, so if I wanted to move this one, which is our 7 marker sword for Lindel, I can now unlock that. If I tried to move that with the lock, as you'll see, I can't. Yeah. So let's unlock that one. Let's Why is that not moving? That's strange. Okay. For some reason, I've unlocked that, and now I can't move it. Let's go back to 0. Let's just check out why. It's good when problems happen. So, for some reason that lock still said it was on. So 7 marker. Now I could move that. Right, let's jump forward to that frame again. So let's have a look at how it looks in the hand. And again, you've got to remember we've done no movement. We're not going to do any of the movement of the hand. So I don't want to move it too far away. All I would do, the markers line up, but the scale of the model and the hand, not perfect. So all I would do is just slide up that cross guard maximum if I was going to. But again, you've got to remember that you'll adjust it for one frame. It might not be the same all the way through, yeah? So there's a little bit of rotation there that I've noticed that we could fix a little more. And then we'll just lock that again and make sure and lock the other one too. I think that'll do for now. So we now have 2 swords in and them being driven by the mocap. Now, this is the particular part of the take where this is why it's really useful to mark up props and capture them rather than just bring a model in and constrain it to the hand, is that we're capturing that movement when they're not in the hands. So you'll see here, if I play this at 0.2 and play this next bit, let's jump that up a bit, otherwise it's going to be really slow. So you'll see now Andy does this thing where and I just missed it, where he throws the sword and spins it over to his other hand, and we've captured that movement really nicely. The other thing as well you've got to remember with people with sword fighting is sometimes they have a loose grip to be able to spin the sword in their hand, and by capturing the sword motion separately, we allowed that sort of loosening of that grip and that dynamic sword movement. And as you'll see in some of the other takes, stop that one and go to fight 3A, where they actually drop their swords on the floor, we get really nice secondary movements. Let's just play that one now. And you get that nice movement of the sword as it drops to the floor without having to do any sim or any secondary animation. In a DCC package later on, we get all that movement for free. The other thing about putting the markers on the sword is we could use these to drive the flex of the sword as well in Maya or something similar. So it gives us lots of options by, that practice of mocapping our props. Okay, so the swords are in and working. Just going to save that. And now what I can do is I could come in here and I could select the sword, create a group, sword 7M. I could have done that through namespace, but I'm just going to go in. The name convention on these swords is not brilliant. So let's do that one. Create a group, sword underscore 6M. That's why. Look, it's put the ones on the end. My bad, because I had these up earlier on. So let's rename that to FBX sword 7M. Same on that one, so they make sense. There we go. That's better now. So if I save that, and now the next thing we can do is we can hide these. Let's go make sure we're back on 0. I can do it in this scene as well. Hide those 2 sword models, and let's do the same process with our lightsaber models. So if I come into FBX model, what should we have? I think there's red on the evil assassin suit, so let's give the assassin the red saber. Drag and drop into the scene, FBX merge, no animation. And the swords and the sabers come in standing up like that. So I can see this bone. I've made it massive here, so we can see it and manipulate it easily. We can change the size of that if we so wish. So if we select that bone and go to properties, I'm going to skeleton node settings, drop that menu down, and now we can scale that down so it's a bit easier. So now from there, I'm going to X drag onto that bone. And this time I'm going to align all. And there we go. It's in and it's lined up. Again, we've got no cross guard here. So what we're going to do is line it up kind of down the length of the markers. Get a nice average position. There we go. And now, when we go to our asset browser and bring our constraint in for that, we need to drop it onto the bone and not the mesh. So let's do that now. Let's go to X-ray mode so we don't do it by accident. Now I can see the bone nice and clearly. And again, I can see both the bones here. So I drag parent constraint, child constraint over to the bone, constrain object, and then pick that one, X, drag down, snap, and now our saber is moving. So I'm just going to quickly go back and bring it in the green saber. Drag that into the scene, FBX merge, no animation. X, drag over to that one, align all. Let's do a quick alignment. I'm going to change the size of that bone. There we go. Bring that down a little bit more. Imagine the line of the sword underneath, and that's one of the things we can actually do. If I unhide the sword, I could use that as our guide to run it down the length of that sword, like so. And now we've got a good alignment. But obviously we can go back and tweak this later on by unlocking it, etc. So let's I'm just double checking this. Right, so let's get a parent constraint on that. So asset browser, parent child constraint, drag and drop onto that one, constrain object, zoom in, select the bone from the mocap, X, drag over, snap. So now we have swords and sabers being driven by mocap. We can go to our groups, and I can even go in now and set up groups for the sabers. So select by namespace. I've got green saber, select branch, okay. Create a group. Saber green. Select by namespace, red saber, okay. Again, deselect before you do it. And then create a group. Saber red. So now we have all the props set up. I've just done everything because I wanted to get both in there. If we go to models only view, I could, let's say we've got the evil character's got the saber, and the good character has his sword. And there we go. We have a fight with props. And this is our initial first pass. So I'm just going to save this one again. Like I said, so recap, what we've done here is we've brought in the FBX models. We've used parent-child constraints to drive the movement from the mocap props. And we've showed how we can unlock and lock the constraint to tweak positions. And we can set up groups to make this more tidy. Now in the final video that's coming next, it'll be about adjustments. So we're going to cover the human IK controls in character controls and down in the navigator options on how we can start to tweak our retarget now that everything is set up. Everything seems to be reading well because The adjustments to the skeletons have been done carefully. The more time you spend on adjusting those skeletons and getting that lineup done like in the previous video, the closer that will be, but we can always go back and adjust, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next video.